So today's little video is about painting leaves, and particularly rose leaves, camellia leaves, any leaves that have a little bit of a shine, that bluey tone that you sometimes see that looks like a shiny leaf is what I want to show. So this gives you an idea of what I'm talking about later with the cool side that looks shiny, and then the warm yellower side. Same here, you can see and the shape that it gives the leaves. So they're just examples of really old paintings. I don't do much botanical kind of work these days, but what I do if I want to create these leaves is one side of the leaf I'll paint yellow. So I'll look at my photo to see which is the warmer side, so the more yellowy green, and if there's a shine on the leaf or a real shadowed side, that's when I would use the blue. So cerulean blue. And I have to say this doesn't necessarily work if you don't have cerulean blue. It doesn't work to just substitute cobalt or ultramarine. Cerulean just has a tendency to look like shine on the leaf. So you could just do the whole leaf yellowy if you want to, or actually cobalt turquoise, very pale, might give you a similar effect. So what I do is paint an underwash that is yellow and blue, and then I let that dry. So I'll do all the leaves on my painting like this. I'll let it dry. Here's one I've prepared earlier. I might zoom in a little bit more so that you can see. So this is already dry. And then I'll come back with my, I want to create basically 3 tones of green. So a darker green mix with indigo and cad yellow, and then a mid-tone green that just has more cad yellow in it usually when I'm mixing up these 2 different tones of green. And this colour that you can see that's in my underwash makes up the 3rd tone. So what I'll do is come in with the darker of the 2 to start with. So to paint the 2nd layer, I'm going to dampen the one side of the petal with clean water. This is called priming, and it allows the paint to actually absorb into the paper. So you can do multiple layers of paint to get detail without affecting the layer before. So I've dampened just up to the vein and out to the edge of the petal, and I've got my paints mixed up. My aim is for 3 tones of green. So I've got my light tone already there. My dark tone is going to be a mix of indigo and cad yellow. And then for a mid-tone green, I'm just going to add a little touch more cad yellow. So I'm going to drop the indigo on this side of the leaf right along the vein, and it'll travel. The paint will always travel where there's water, and then it will stop. It won't go outside of where you've placed the water. So clean my brush, and now I'm picking up more of a mid-tone green. So I've got a little bit more cad yellow in this mix. If you've got some tube greens like sap green, you're welcome to use those. And then again, I clean my brush, I'm drying it off. I've got some paper towel beside me, so I'm taking most of the moisture out, and then see how much moisture there is still in my brush, if you see it on my fingers. So I squeeze it out and flatten my brush at the same time, and then I stroke across from dark to light, or light to dark, but in the direction that the veins would go on this leaf. I don't go crossways. I'm always coming in the direction that the veins would travel. And I'm just making those colours merge a little bit more naturally. And then if I was doing a large painting with multiple leaves like the ones I showed at the beginning, I would do half of every leaf. And then when those are dry, or by the time I've done 1/2 of every leaf, I can come back and do the other half of the leaf. So I'm leaving at the moment, because this is wet, I'm being very careful to leave the vein dry in the middle so that my paints this side doesn't cause the other side to cauliflower or bloom. And I've just touched that there So you'll see the colour will travel out. But that's fine. I've just got to be careful when I come back here with colour. So now on this side I've got this blue underwash, and I want to keep some of that blue so that that's where my shine area is. And to make my leaf more shaped, like more curved and rounded, I'll put the dark on the opposite side to where I put it on the first side that I painted. So I'm putting it now on the outer edge rather than near the vein. And just by chance I'm actually nearly pure indigo there. I don't actually have much yellow in that mix. But now I'm going to come in with the mid-tone green, so a little bit more cad yellow into it, and I might just put that next to there and just up against the vein. So I've cleaned my brush again, touched it to the paper towel, squeezed it out to flatten the brush. So, sorry, I think that was off camera. I squeeze it out to get the excess paint out and to flatten it. And then I'll just pull across. I might turn it around to make it easier for me to pull back in the direction that the veins will go. And I just touched across here, so I may get a funny little bloom. And I want to be careful not to cover any more in this area. I want to keep that little bit of pale blue showing through there. So we've got a couple of options then with veins. I must have dropped a tiny bit of water, like a drip off my brush just there, so I'm just going to correct that. And as long as my brush, the consistency of paint on my brush is drier or thicker pigment than it is on the paper, I can come back and correct. To create veins on our leaf, we've got a few options. The easiest way, I think, to create them, I'll do this on this side, is to use the pointy end of a brush and just press on. Where there's not much paint, the veins aren't going to become very dark. But that forces the pigment to go into the indentation on the paper. Our other option is we can lift veins out, and if I'm lifting out, I'll use a chisel, flat chisel brush. Or there's also a pretty clever brush you can use at the end when it's dry called the Eradicator, and it's also flat like a chisel. But with this one, I'm always turning so that I'm controlling the direction that I'm working in. I've got this just slightly damp. I've dried it on paper towel, then squeezed it out. And my paint has to be at a certain stage of drying, otherwise it will keep running back in like that is there. But if I just suggest a few of these, I'll be happy. I don't have to have really detailed veins. But you can see here with these, it's harder to, you've got less control than where you want, than where you might use the end of a brush. Because my brush is straight, as a flat, I'm going to get a straighter line. But what I like with this technique is you can see I'm lifting out, but then the colour that I've picked up actually transfers into the light part of the leaf, so it actually picks colour up and then drops it. So sometimes I've just got to do this a few times and I'm using my hand, it might have been off camera, to clean the brush each time like that. So if I want to get some veins going, this was a bit solid, but you can see the colours just running back in a little bit, which is good because it's still damp. And you can also just paint them with a fine brush at the end. My next little step that I love, particularly if they are new growth, if I wanted to pick new growth, is a little bit of red. So I'm just picking up some cad red, quite thick on the brush. Because this is damp, I have to be drier on my brush than the paper and the paint, on the paper. So I've just gone pure pigment. I haven't picked up any moisture. Otherwise it would just disturb it. And I'm just coming along I'd actually probably usually wait for that to be a little bit drier. It's a really cold night, so it's actually stayed quite moist for quite a long time. So I might just let it set a little bit more, and then I'll come back and just add detail to that. I'm not sure whether you can see the red very well there. And so I don't usually do that all the way around the leaf. I'll just do it more up in the tip. If you go out of where you were wanting to, so a lot of people say you can't fix watercolour. You absolutely can fix watercolour. The mistake most people would make is come in with a damp brush and wet that. So what happens then is the paint travels even further. The secret to fixing or removing paint is using paper towel and pressing that paper dry to push it back. So because this is a staining colour like Cad Red, I won't totally get it off, but usually if I was doing a painting with lots of leaves, I'd also have background coming up against it. And so I would let that nearly dry and then just come back with the red. It needs to be a little bit drier, probably I'm going in too soon just for the sake of the video. And you can see where I must have touched the vein here the same as I did here. So that wouldn't worry me normally. I'd wait for it to dry and then I would just soften either side so that it blends and just looks like it's more curved there. But to show you if you did feel like you wanted to lift that up to kind of correct it, just that same nearly dry brush that I was lifting the veins out with, I can do the same here. And if I was doing that, I could run it all the way along so that it continues this softer edge to my two sections of the leaf. Doing that just means this now is softer than up here where it's up against dry paper. But I would also have to keep an eye on it because the paint might run a little bit back in as it's drying. And I can lift that vein out just a little bit more before it dries. So that's an example of a rose leaf.